Hey Everpony. It's been about 6 months since I last posted, so I thought it's time to post again. And so I threw this together in about 15 minutes, and here we are. So now, I present to you, in no particular order, the top 16 reasons why I'm still alive after 2022. This year was the year of not being able to play anything. I couldn't really get myself to start any game when the year started. I'd be indecisive and I'd just end up playing Inscription Casey's mod or Peglin just so I'd have something to do. I did play through a couple games from my backlog, namely Henry Stickmin and There Is No Game, but I think these games only dug me further into the hole of not being able to start anything. Because while I could progress a lot in Henry Stickmin or There Is No Game, that progression never really felt meaningful. Henry Stickmin got some laughs out of me, and There Is No Game had a really good first couple of hours, but ultimately, finishing both these games felt more like a relief than an accomplishment. And that gave me a bit of a negative association with games for a bit, and I didn't really play anything for a while. There was one game I got through during this time that I enjoyed quite a lot though. A little indie title called Oneshot. Oneshot is really special to me. It's nothing mind-blowing, although it did manage to catch me off guard with a couple of its fourth wall-breaking moments. But what I really love about the game is its atmosphere and how that contrasts with the game's protagonist. The atmosphere of Oneshot is oppressive. It weighs down on you in every area. The slow droning music of the Badlands goes right along with its seemingly never-ending fields of sand mired in darkness. The apathetic songs in the Glen perfectly match its citizens' attitudes as they seem to be losing hope for their home and its survival. The Refuge's music is slightly more hopeful than what came before, since the city is people's final hope for survival, but it has a bittersweet tinge to it as even the city won't last long without the sun. As you make your way through the game, everyone you talk with seems to want to have hope that you'll save them all by replacing the sun, but they become apathetic, and some aren't even sure that the new sun will save them from the problems they're facing. Now contrast this with the main character Nico. Nico is a little baby cat boy. He's cute, kind, and just a little kid. But it's not like he's all positivity all the time. He's pretty optimistic as you start out, but the oppressive atmosphere starts to weigh on him just like it does on the player. You see him go from optimistic to worried to approaching hopelessness, which you can really start to see in the dream sequences. I think Nico was a great idea for a protagonist in this world, a great idea made even better by its execution. You can make comparisons between the sun's extinction in this world and the climate crisis in our own world, and taming can be compared to various social issues as well, but that sounds artsy and pretentious, so instead I'll talk about the ending. You get to the final choice: save Nico or save the world. And this choice is just so good, and I think it's a perfect climax. I like that each ending doesn't make one seem better than the other. It's not a good/bad ending situation, it's just a choice. That's only half the story of the Steam and the console version though, but I think that it's the important half, and the part that was most interesting to me. And I think it wraps up the story nicely. Disregarding Oneshot, I hadn't really played anything for a couple of months by the time April rolled around, but I finally broke through by just deciding to replay some of my old favorites. Because, as the wise Tim Rogers once said,
I am done playing huge new games I don't even know if I'm gonna like. I want to play old stuff I know I already like.
So with that mindset, I began playing Wind Waker. I actually got the Wii U HD version because I hadn't played it yet, and the eShop is dying, so... But the gameplay improvements are so good, especially the benefit of not having to buy both Triforce charts and charts to those charts, like in the original on GameCube. The Swift Sail speed boost was a much needed improvement, having the Wind Waker always accessible through the D-pad was great, and just a lot of good improvements overall. This was actually the first time I finally got around to visiting every island and filling out the whole map. And all that makes it sound like I really love this game, but I feel like playing it on Wii U finally made the issues with the game's structure much more clear to me. The game is still great fun because it's Wind Waker after all, but I did end up having some issues with it. The Triforce Hunt is still a pain even with the improvements. There's still that part of the game that makes it seem like you can choose one of two dungeons to go to, when really it's only possible to do them in one specific order. You have a huge open world that's probably no bigger than Ocarina's world when you remove the ocean, And as big as an annoyance as Hyrule Field was in Ocarina, that issue is spread to the entire world map in Wind Waker. Not to mention that the cell shade effect is completely ruined on the character models due to the new lighting, and rather than looking like dynamic 2D characters, they look like N64 era models with big eyes and bad lighting. The cell shading almost looks right when you're in very bright light, which probably explains why there's so much bloom. The new lighting also messed up these guys' torchlights, so it's not exactly clear where their view is, which is a little annoying. All these things come together and make it look like a playset, and a poorly modeled one at that. Like, someone took all of the models and level geometry and just put them into the real world, and it doesn't look good. I did also find it funny that the Wii U Tingle device doesn't work anymore because Miiverse shut down, even though the GameCube version's Tingle item, which is a decade older, still functions as intended. Funny in a tragic way because I'm still crying over Miiverse's closing. Poor Wii U owners, they can't catch a break. I think I'll stick with the GameCube version in the future, just because the visuals are such a big part of the reason I love Wind Waker, and I'm willing to put up with some gameplay annoyances to get that. I also realize I'm in the minority here, so maybe I should shut up before I get even more people to come after me. Then I played Skate 3, and man oh man is this game fantastic. Even better than I remember. There are no lows when playing Skate 3. I think this really helped me get a jump start on games this year. It also helped me rediscover my love of skating games. I didn't even play it with the intention of making a video on it, I just played it because it's one of those comfort games. Something I can turn on and immediately start having fun with. But now I've got a whole video on it almost ready to go and start editing. So, only about 2 months away. But I had one more of my favorites I wanted to get to before starting some new stuff. Toby Fox is my favorite game designer. Game director? Game writer? Whatever he is now. And I think that Deltarune is going to far surpass Undertale. And in many ways, I think that they're already equals. I played Deltarune Chapter 1 because I wanted to play Chapter 2 again, but I hadn't played the first chapter since 2019 when it released on Switch, and playing it again now, I feel like these characters are so well written. It's basically impossible to not find these guys endearing unless you're some kind of natural-born hater or something. Lancer comes off annoying at first, but starts to be cute as you realize he's trying his best to be evil to please his dad. Little remarks from Susie that hint at her poor home life help her transformation not feel out of place. Sans. Yeah, these characters are great. And that continues into Chapter 2. Spamton, while being the subject of thousands of shitposts for the 6 months after his creation, is also the most interesting character in the game. Unlike Jevil in the previous chapter, we actually get to know Spamton and what he's all about before fighting him in his insanely hard boss fight, which I actually did this time. In fact, the main reason why I wanted to play again was just to fight Spamton and do the Snowgrave route. There's so many questions left about Spamton and whoever his boss is, and you learn just enough to have questions about what's coming next. Music is absolutely fantastic, as expected from Toby Fox, especially a Cyber's World. God, when that drop hit for the first time, I literally just stopped moving, sat back in my chair, and listened and took in the visuals. Man, it's so good, and a great return after 3 years. And with that, I was finally ready to start playing games again. I played Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, a game that I wasn't sure was ever gonna release, after being delayed for like 3 years. And honestly, it felt a little disappointing. I get that a lot of work was put into just getting the game to look and feel the same in Unity as it did in the Source engine, but the amount of new stuff feels so insubstantial relative to the amount of time spent waiting for it. I'm glad that it was able to reach a new audience because just the original game alone is fantastic, so it being made far more accessible is a win. But as a fan of the original, I guess I just wanted more. At least that's what I was gonna say until I found this motherfucking bucket! I like this bucket. It is worth the price of admission. Okay, but really, the stuff that is here is absolutely fantastic. While the first game felt a bit one-note with its jokes, Ultra Deluxe explores what it's like following that line into its absolute most extreme possible conclusion. And it's hilarious. But more than anything, this has got me excited for Davey Wreden's next project. The one that he's working on with Carla Zimonia. I think I'm saying that right. The Gone Home creator. Another great game, by the way. I was always a bigger fan of the Beginner's Guide than the Stanley Parable, and this new project seems like it's going to be more along those lines, so I'm excited. After that, I continued with some really short games. Before Your Eyes is a fantastic little game that's controlled entirely through blinking. This was a game that I had on my list for a while, but I never had a webcam, so I finally broke down and bought one to play it. And God, it's absolutely fantastic. It tells such a good story, and I think that the way it presents itself is so good. I'm gonna spoil the main twist of the story right now. It's free on mobile if you have Netflix, and it's only about an hour and a half long, and I totally recommend it. You can also skip to this time code if you'd rather play it yourself, or you can just listen if you don't care. Anyways, so you play like the first 45 minutes, then you get pulled back to the Wolfman's boat, and after you're here for a bit, you basically get told that your character made up the whole great life that he had. So you go back, and then you get to see what really happened. That this kid who wanted to be a great artist and travel the world never got to do any of that, because his time got cut short. They do a great job at representing the pain from Billy's sickness through just visuals and audio, and by limiting your actions, they show you exactly how he was feeling. But the thing that really gets me is this speech at the end, as the wolf is trying to really sell your story to the gatekeeper of the afterlife. But the best part about it is, as you blink, the speech changes between your mom saying it to you and the wolf saying it to God, both describing how the people who love you see your life. A complete contrast to how you see yourself, not as a failure, but as a shining beacon of hope and joy. And that it doesn't matter where you might be right now or how you're doing. These people still love you, and they're proud of you, because you're still trying. I have a bad habit of projecting my own disappointment of myself onto others, thinking that everyone else is just as disappointed with my failures as I am. And while there are some people who are, I know that none of the ones who really matter to me feel that way. And having Before Your Eyes be a reminder of that for me was exactly what I needed as I graduated, and I had no idea what to do. I played this game 3 times now, and I've cried like a baby every single time. Before Your Eyes makes me want to make something like it, and I hope one day I can. After that, I picked up a game that I'd been hearing about for years, What Remains of Edith Finch, and all of that time of hype really didn't diminish its appeal. The art direction for this game is really good. It feels like a Dr. Seuss novel brought to life, and then left to rot for years until you finally find it. All of the scenarios are fantastic, but the one at the very end is the only one I really want to talk about. And if you've played it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. This scenario is the ultimate encapsulation of what late-stage capitalism does to people. You go to work at your soul-sucking job so that you can have a place to sleep and food to eat, and that's it. Depression washes over you as you realize that this is what you'll do the rest of your life. Anxiety comes along as you fear if and how you'll ever be able to retire. Everyone around you tells you that this is just how things have to be until you just accept it as true. They talk about work like it's this holy grail of what a human can do, being a little cog in the machine that keeps the world chugging along, and that it's somehow honorable to toil away your life for someone who never cared about you. Then, you kill yourself. Because nothing can be worse than this. There's not much you can do except hope that there's better possibilities on the horizon. Better possibilities like a summer vacation in the mountains! God, I hate that transition. I'm gonna change that later. A Short Hike is an adorable and heartwarming game. It's like Animal Crossing without the based anti-capitalism message, and it's a really relaxing time. I played through A Short Hike before and just kinda gunned for the end, finishing in about 20 minutes. But this time I took time to mosey around and just play through and just enjoy it. I talked to most of the NPCs, finished several quests, though not all. I fished a bit, and I even helped someone else to the top of the mountain. It really made that cell phone call to your mom and subsequent return to your aunt's house feel that much more meaningful. Great game. Highly recommend it for its hangoutitudeness. These games were some of the best experiences I'd had with gaming in years, and they were the perfect introduction back after having such a hard time starting anything. They were all able to hit this emotional resonance with me, which is just something I love when a game can do. And I think that these games are the best example of storytelling I've seen in games, really using interactivity to their advantage. Not that these stories couldn't be told in other mediums, but they used their medium to their advantage. I didn't think games could do storytelling better than this. And then I played Omori. Tell me if you've heard this one before. Omori is a quirky Earthbound-inspired JRPG with themes of depression and suicide. The creator was a fan of Yume Nikki, and the game includes music by Toby Fox. Yeah. You probably already know what Omori is, and you probably don't know all of what it is. And I'll talk about that, but first I want to talk about the gameplay. Omori sets itself apart from Earthbound with its emotion and energy mechanics. Emotions are essentially Pokemon types that you can change for characters on the fly. Happy beats angry, angry beats sad, and sad beats happy. Each with special traits on their own like increased speed or attack, and caveats as well like reduced defense. Then you have the energy mechanic that allows you to do follow-up moves during your turn, kind of like action commands in Paper Mario, but not exactly. Or you can save it up and do an all-out attack as long as none of your teammates have died. There's some completely broken strategies as well, such as Kel Nuke, the funny move where Kel one-shots every single boss. Omori is fun, and it's made even better by its writing and characters. Rarely do I laugh out loud when playing a game, but Omori did that for me. The characters are likable and come together to make a great group dynamic. And you could feel that something's missing in the real world. The group isn't quite whole, even after getting Aubrey and Hero back. Obviously the thing that's missing is Mari, and it's just done really well, and made even better by its optional moments. If you can't tell, Omori is a game that I have a profoundly difficult time talking about. Because while I can describe the more objective elements of its story, gameplay, and characters, I struggle to describe what these things mean to me. So I guess that this is going to be my best attempt at that. Full spoilers ahead. Omori is, on the surface, about a friend group coming to terms with the suicide of their friend Mari. And I think Omori could have just been this and been a perfectly competent game, but it doesn't. Mari didn't kill herself. You killed her. As in you, the character you're playing. And the story isn't about processing grief in a healthy way. It instead becomes a story about forgiveness. As a kid finally forgives himself enough that he can admit what he's done to the people he loves. And finally start the road towards healing his own mind. Black Space is a truly disturbing dive into Sunny's psyche, filled with seemingly random pieces of memories all strewn about. But even in that, you have standout moments, like when you can optionally answer a ringing phone that says, "Sunny, we're moving away." This moment really stuck out to me because I realized it's the impetus for the entire story. Sunny's gone through this headspace journey to find the truth countless times, as explained after Humphrey. And the only reason that Sunny's finally able to break free is because there's a time limit now. Obviously, he still wouldn't have made it through without Kel, as we see in the Hikikomori route, but he'd never have answered the door for Kel without this time limit he's got now, as Kel has tried before. Back to Black Space, you see these memories that have been corrupted because of the horrible events that took place. Even the good memories aren't safe. This image of Mari with an exposed brain saying, "Expand your mind, Omori," was particularly haunting. I love Omori. I love Omori because of Kel, and his relentless pursuit to be Sunny's friend again. I love Omori because of its happy vibes and headspace. I love Omori because of its execution of its storytelling. I love Omori because of Black Space and its use as a nonverbal, esoteric storytelling tool. I love Omori because of its effective use of foreshadowing. I love Omori. And it's the best game I played this year. But it's not the last game I played this year. So, do you want to hear about the only game I played that was actually released this year? Besides the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, because I forgot that released this year, so I wrote this before I thought about that. That game was Tunic. I almost squeezed Crisis Core Reunion in there, but I couldn't quite finish it in time. Tunic is the first game since Outer Wilds that has made me feel the same way. In a way that, like, I'm solving a puzzle of the world, like I'm slowly unlocking it piece by piece. Rather than being frustrated because I haven't been given all the information I need to solve a puzzle. A good puzzle is supposed to have that aha moment, where everything clicks and you finally can solve the puzzle. But I rarely get that. Too often it's more of a, "Oh, come on, how was I supposed to know that?" moment when I finally give up and Google the answer. And I'll fully attribute that to myself being stubborn and having tunnel vision sometimes. But I don't have that issue with Tunic. Every puzzle made sense. I kept getting those aha moments that you're supposed to have. Especially with the elusive golden path. As soon as I realized the solution, I started seeing it everywhere. Not gonna explain what I mean by that because of spoilers, but you know what I'm talking about if you've played it. Tunic has more than just good puzzles going for it though. Its combat is some of the most fun I've played this year, with creative uses of items at your disposal, or just brute forcing your way through with a sword and a dodge like me. However you choose to approach it, the controls are responsive, mechanics are intuitive, and it just feels great to play overall. Another game I played this year with an even heavier combat focus was Devil May Cry 5. I think this game's combat might be too big for my brain. I had a lot of fun with it, but I know that I'm barely scratching the surface with its combat depth, especially when it comes to bosses. I barely scraped by on most of these bosses, and maybe used a revive once or twice on a couple of them. And I've seen what others can do against these guys. While I don't think I'll ever get there, I'm impressed that the skill ceiling is so high. My only real complaints about it are that the auto-targeting messes up more often than I'd like, which I guess is a complaint with most 3D action games, and that the V sections aren't super fun. But it's definitely a game I could see myself coming back to over the years. Besides the gameplay though, you know what this game really gets right? Presentation. This is one of the few realistic looking games that I enjoy looking at. I put that realistic in air quotes because it's such heavily stylized realism that it's barely realistic at all, which I think is why it looks so good. These characters' designs are larger than life, not to mention what they actually do. If you need an example of what's so great about this game's presentation, just go watch the opening credits on YouTube. I'll link it in the card thingy up there, and part of it should be playing now. You know what else Devil May Cry 5 does right? Characterization through gameplay. You don't need a bunch of dialogue or cutscenes to tell you that Dante's an experienced demon hunter. You feel it when you play him. With every woo and hiya he shouts as he flings around his nunchucks, or in his run animation as he sprints gleefully to his next enemy, or even just the myriad of options in his arsenal right off the bat. You can tell V is a little weak boy who hasn't touched grass in the past century because all he can do during combat is hide back and try not to get hit while he sends his animals to go fight, only going to deliver the final blow on an enemy. You know Virgil is an overconfident yet powerful villain because of his teleporting and multi-hit moves that look effortless for him to perform. And you know Nero's a lesbian because of his haircut. It's all about the details, man. A surprise hit for me this year was the Half-Life series. An especially surprising hit after my experience with Half-Life 1 back in April. I gave up on Half-Life long before I stopped playing. I played on God mode for the last 3 chapters before quitting because I was getting so frustrated at combat arenas and running out of ammo. And I gave up on that with the 2 missions left and watched a Let's Play to get whatever remained of the story in those last 2 chapters. God, this game is so frustrating. The progression is maze-like, which would be fine. I like Doom 1993 levels, and they have the same maze-like design a lot. But the difference here is that everything in a Half-Life level looks exactly the same, so it's almost impossible to tell where you've been. I had to pull up a walkthrough more times than I could count, and then there's combat arenas where it feels like enemies are just kind of placed wherever the level designer felt like putting them, which made a lot of combat frustrating as I kept dying because I hadn't memorized exactly where enemies would pop out from every corner. Doom didn't have this problem, except in its single worst level, because you open a door and saw all the enemies that existed. No random spawning in when enough get defeated. The story also isn't much to sneeze at, like, you are in a facility, you made a portal so aliens are also in the facility, you need to escape. That's it. Like, G-Man is the thing that everyone talks about when they say how great Half-Life's story is, and like, I saw G-Man sneaking around a few levels, and then he's at the end of the game, and gives a little speech about going through the portal or being killed. The story isn't much more complicated than Doom's, yet it gets all this praise because of some Uncanny Valley office worker? I don't get it. And that made me hesitant to start its sequel. So hesitant that I didn't get to it for 5 months. But I really wish I hadn't waited that long. Because oh my god, Half-Life 2 is an amazing game. A great first-person shooter that knows how to just be fun. And be fun without letting its storytelling suffer. Half-Life 2 has unique combat mechanics. Yes, you still have that core of shoot and search, but the gravity gun alone adds so much depth, turning basically every physics object into a weapon. It completely changes how you look at the game world. Bigger objects do more damage, sharp objects kill in one shot, etc. Honestly, a lot of fun from Half-Life 2 comes from its physics system, and not just with the gravity gun. There's a part with a magnet in Chapter 7 where you can pick up your vehicle and just generally mess with the environment, and you have to get across a gap with a raised bridge. And I just knocked down the bridge, but I think you were supposed to move it with a lever or something, but either way it was fun when I realized I could just do that to progress. There's also a lot of good quality of life things that were nice while playing. Stuff like always knowing when enemies are ahead because you hear their radios was one thing, and because of that I didn't get startled or end up dying because I can't think fast enough to get the right gun out. I also like that you have the bars on either side of your crosshairs so you can always have an idea of your ammo and health without having to move your eyes too far from the main action of the screen. I very much appreciated that easy mode felt tailored for players inexperienced with FPS games, because I am that player. And I still gotta have a decently challenging time while not getting overly frustrated from death after death. Frick this partner mechanic though. The gravity gun gets approximately 400 times cooler in the final chapters when you could finally pick up soldiers and throw them around. Awesome mechanic, and I completely understand why this wasn't part of your base moveset. The presentation is stellar for a 2004 game. Character models look great, and facial animations are quite impressive given their time. And I'd say still look decent enough today. The cutscenes aren't really cutscenes at all and just kind of happen in the world. You're free to move around and do whatever you want as they play out. That's something almost no game does, and I think it's a unique strength of Valve games. They never really stop you so that they can show you story stuff for the most part. I see a lot of Portal's DNA in Half-Life 2's gameplay, though maybe it's more so just feeling similar because Valve started to find their unique style. I really enjoy Half-Life 2 though. It's got good puzzle solving, combat is vastly improved, the game looks great, especially for 2004, and it was just fun. I have basically the same things to say about episode 1 and 2, but I'll add that both episodes have a lot of good character work that Half-Life 2 didn't have as much time to do. And G-Man was made a lot more interesting for me in these episodes. The only thing I can say is that it's a shame there never was a Half-Life 3, or an episode 3. Maybe someday. Back to the lab again. Back to the lab again. Oh, not again. Okay, so I guess I kinda lied at the beginning when I said this was the year of not being able to play anything. Because this year was the year of playing everything. I played RPGs like Omori and Dragon Quest XI. I played walking sims like Yume Nikki and Edith Finch. I played first-person shooters like Half-Life and Doom. I played multiplayer stuff like Omega Strikers and Fall Guys. All these types of games that I'm usually pretty apprehensive about playing, I ended up giving it a shot, and mostly enjoyed quite a bit. Something I did for the first time this year was watching someone else play through a game that I wanted to play. Final Fantasy VII is a game that I've been wanting to play because I love the remake. And I want to try out some of the extended media like Crisis Core, but I know that I needed the story of the original first. I tried playing through the game a few times, but since RPGs are already a genre I have some trouble with, it made it especially hard playing a 25-year-old one that didn't have all the convenient features of some newer ones like Dragon Quest XI. But I mostly wanted just the story of it anyway, so I decided to watch someone else's playthrough. And I don't think that it took away from how incredible this story is. Somehow Final Fantasy VII has better characters than most AAA story-focused games do now, or even in the past several years. And they're able to communicate so much about these characters despite using these little chibi models for most of the game. It's actually incredible. Despite knowing essentially every twist and turn of the plot, I still found it really engaging. And the way that some of those parts of the story were done in particular was much more important than what actually happened. If spoilers truly ruin a story, then it often means that the story wasn't that good. And that certainly rings true for Final Fantasy VII. I'm going to talk about the main spoiler for Final Fantasy VII that probably everyone knows, but here's a time code if you somehow don't know what I'm talking about and you want to play it without spoilers. Okay, so Aerith's death scene is a great example of this. Well, I knew Aerith was going to die. I didn't know that Cloud was fighting against Sephiroth as Sephiroth was forcing Cloud to kill Aerith. And as soon as Cloud finally breaks free of Sephiroth's influence and you think everything's safe, here comes Sephiroth to finish it himself. As Aerith takes her last breath, her theme starts playing, but what really gets me is that the theme continues through this huge boss battle you do right afterwards. It's incredibly well done, because you're not thinking about the boss, you're thinking about what just happened. Even beyond that, for the rest of the game, it truly feels like something's missing. I remember thinking to myself near the end of the game, the story feels so hollow without Aerith here. Not to mention you never get another dedicated healer for your party. There's always an empty spot after Aerith dies. But then it hit me, like, that's the point. For anyone that's lost a loved one, you know that it's not the initial shock of death that's the worst part about losing someone. It's the days, weeks, and months afterward when you expect to see them and they're not there. And this is something that Final Fantasy VII is able to capture extraordinarily well. Just don't do what I did and watch Advent Children immediately afterwards. It does its best to ruin a lot about the characters in various moments from the game. So at least wait a while after playing the game before watching that. Or even better, just don't watch it at all. So I also did stuff besides playing games this year, but I only really want to talk about one of those things, because it's a big reason why I'm alive at the end of 2022. Yeah, that's an over-exaggeration, but it sounded good, right? But I would have had a much worse time getting through October and November without this TV show. And it's Steven Universe. I didn't like Steven Universe for a while after starting. It takes a bit to find its footing, and it seems to do almost everything it can to lose that footing as the series goes on. But it genuinely has some really great characters, Peridot and Garnet especially stood out, and I love the song that plays in the end credits. But honestly, I just really needed it. I needed something uncompromisingly positive I could come home to every night after basically working out for 8 hours stacking groceries. I could barely walk by the time I finished each shift, so I fell down on the couch and watched Steven Universe. It kept me going for those 2 months of awful daily pain while my body tried to adjust to this new normal. The music is happy and charming, the art's colorful and cute, and everyone cries, which is what I felt like doing at the end of every day. It was the thing I didn't know I needed to get through my daily workload, but I'm glad I had it. Thanks, Steven Universe. But I capped off 2022 with Kentucky Route Zero, a game that I can't seem to stop thinking about. I'd been looking forward to playing Kentucky Route Zero for pretty much this entire year. I just had other games I was playing, or I didn't have the money to buy it, or I was busy working, or any number of other reasons that come down to life just got in the way. But it felt right to have this be my last game of the year after all of that build-up. There's a lot to dissect in Kentucky Route Zero. Every piece of dialogue is practically dripping with meaning, but to start this mini dissection, Kentucky Route Zero is a story told in 5 acts and 5 interludes released across 7 years. And it didn't make any sense to me. It's structured and presented like a theatrical play, and it was hard to follow from scene to scene. I wasn't seeing the main plot here. Sure, there was the ultimate goal of getting to Dogwood Drive, but it seemed like so many completely disconnected events were happening. And then suddenly we were there. It was only looking back that I started to see the story as a whole. Act 1, you're a delivery driver looking for Dogwood Drive until you break your leg. Act 2, you try to find a doctor to fix your broken leg. In Act 3, you sell your soul to a corporation, and soon you'll have to work there to pay off your debt. In Act 4, you and your friends travel down a river, viewing the sights as you head towards Dogwood Drive. And in Act 5, your friends make it to Dogwood Drive without you. I think that I got too caught up in the supernatural things that were happening, and I expected an explanation rather than focusing on the story as a whole. But the game is in the genre of magical realism, which basically means that magical things that happen in the story are treated as normal or even mundane. I've not read or watched a story like this before, so I had a hard time catching up, but the story is easy to understand as a whole looking back on it. And a replay only made that more clear. I think it's a pretty obvious critique of capitalism, showing how greed killed hundreds of miners including Shannon's parents, how it left the town in Act 5 in total shambles with destroyed houses and flooded streets, how it's putting Conway into debt just because he broke his leg, how it entraps you into debt and then forces you to work the rest of your life, and how it indoctrinates people into thinking it's honorable to serve under capitalism. I mean, hell, when you go to Hard Times Distillery, there's literally coffins with people inside burning to create the whiskey. It doesn't get more overt than that. But I think the overt nature of its critique hides something else underneath it, about how people commune together in the worst of times. How even when the world outside is at its worst, we can come together, sing an old hymn, and cry together. I always looked forward to the hymns they sang at the end of each chapter. They're always perfectly placed, and I just stand still and listen whenever one came on. What I ended up remembering more than an overarching story was the moments from the game, like these hymns. I remember Junebug singing at the bar. I remember eating at Sam and Ida's with the group after Conway went to work at Hard Times. I remember a funeral for 2 horses. I remember third floor bears. These are the things that make up Kentucky Route Zero for me. Not the destination, not the journey, but the stops, the pauses, the times when we didn't worry about how to take our next step, but instead just sat down and gave ourselves some time. 2022 has been maybe the hardest year of my life. I had my final semester of college, which was second in difficulty only to the first semester. I didn't get hired after a 3-year-long internship, which rocked my world quite a bit, and is something I'm still dealing with the effects of. I went on a week-long trip to taste every exclusive Mountain Dew, but I couldn't even try all of them because people in Michigan are the worst drivers I've seen in my life. Yeah, that's right. If you live in Michigan, fuck you. Roe v. Wade got overturned this year. I've spent a substantial amount of time this year in front of my desk applying for jobs, rather than being out seeing the world or being with friends. Because I need money so as not to die, so I need a proper job. And yet, here I am, almost a year after my graduation, still in the same place I was before, but now working at a grocery store. I'm starting to worry about what the rest of my 20s are going to be like. This is supposed to be the best time of my life, but I'm more miserable than I've ever been before. I thought these were the golden years, so what's the problem? I realized I talked a lot about capitalism bad in this video, which is emblematic of how I'm feeling about the world in general right now. Maybe those feelings crept into my analysis, or maybe I'm just more attuned to seeing these parallels given this awful year. I'm trying to stay positive for 2023. I have better strategies for applying for jobs, I've got plans for projects I want to complete, and I've got more people on my side fighting for me than I've ever had before. The world sucks, but I'm gonna try my damnedest to carve out a space for me that sucks less. Cheers to the new year. I hope you're all safe, happy, and healthy, and I hope you all have a fantastic 2023.
This world is not my home. I'm just passing through. My treasures and my hopes are placed beyond the blue. Many friends and kin have gone on before, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, oh Lord, what will I do? Angels beckon me to heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. I have a loving mother up in glory land, and I don't expect to stop until I shake her hand. She's waiting out for me in heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, oh Lord, what will I do? Angels beckon me to heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore.